it took time to work with staff to create opportunities for teens, because there is stigma about youth volunteer programs, that the caliber is just couldn't be as, good as adult volunteers, or they won't
Sure.
be serious in their work. So I think a lot of that is highlighting the success of teens, and we try to do that often by showcasing the great work that they do.
That was Corina Sadler, CVA, Volunteer Resources Supervisor at the City of Plano. After experiencing the joys of volunteering as a teen herself, Corina Sadler has cemented her career enriching the lives of teenagers throughout the creation of the Teen Volunteer Program for the City of Plano. In this episode of the podcast, we discuss the stigmas that exist when it comes to young volunteers and why they should be embraced as a force for change. We also discuss the important role that technology plays in engaging and retaining teen volunteers who are looking for new and meaningful ways to give back to their communities. If this is your first time checking us out, the Engage Volunteer podcast aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging their communities to connect them to events and causes they're passionate about. The best way to support the Engage Volunteer podcast is to click follow on your Spotify app and tell your friends about us. We also really appreciate feedback on the podcast and would love to hear your thoughts. If you'd like to share your thoughts, or if you have someone in mind for us to interview, please don't hesitate to get in touch via LinkedIn. Thanks so much for sharing.
All right, Corina Sadler, CVA, Volunteer Resource Supervisor at the City of Plano. Thank you so much for joining us on the Engage Volunteer. How are you over there in America?
We're doing great here in Texas.
Yes, good. Good to hear. Good to hear. And it's COVID, tough year. How have you gone personally, and how's the organization been?
Yes, what a year 2020 has been. We're hanging in there like most of my municipal government friends around the world. It definitely was crazy to have our volunteer programs shut down. Many of us in one day, we got the news that we needed to stop.
Yeah, for sure. Now, CVA in your title, give me some background to CVA and the process you went through to become approved.
Yeah, so the CVA is a global credential. It stands for Certified Volunteer Administrator. It's administered by the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration, CCVA. And it is an exam held twice a year. You have to have at least 3 years of volunteer management experience to sit for the exam. And there's a textbook, so many resources. I sit on the outreach committee for CCVA, and we are a group of 1,100 volunteer managers all over the world. And we're always looking to professionalize the roles of volunteer managers and organizations and create a great network of people that do this work.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I mean, hopefully this audience listening to the podcast today will find it interesting. Why do you do it? If I was a volunteer manager, why am I doing it? And what do you sort of get out of it, I guess, through being involved with the program?
So many of us in volunteer management, after 5 years or so, come to a crossroads where we wonder, what is our next level? What can show that we are still dedicated to the work and that we want to prove excellence in the work of volunteer engagement? So the CVA answers that for many of us. In our organizations, sometimes there is an emphasis on credentialing, on professionalism.
Yep.
And for our roles, there are not many options out there, not many masters or PhDs in volunteer management.
Correct. You're right.
So
You're right.
looking at hands-on work and what can we add to this work, the CVA credential is just a great addition to a resume and really boosts the profession globally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And from those people globally that have this, what sort of industries are they coming from? Obviously, you're the city-based volunteering side. Is that where predominantly they're from, or really diverse?
I would say very diverse. I wish there were more government leaders in the CVA group, but we have so many different organizations represented, from social justice organizations to animal welfare to those working in hunger, domestic violence, hospice, really most of the large nonprofit sectors
Non-profit based. Yeah.
are represented. And then there are some others, consultants, different other industries that come in that have a relationship with volunteers, but might not be leading volunteers. So it's really open to those that are at least spending 30% of their job working with volunteers.
Yeah, makes sense. Fantastic. Well, yeah, great. Thanks for the understanding there of the CVA program. Now, for today, Corina, really keen to understand your journey to get to where you are today. I know it's been an interesting one, and you play a very important role there in the City of Plano. So please just take us back to the start, if you will, about your journey to get into volunteering as you're growing up and sort of the role it's played in your life today.
I would love to. So I'm going to take you back to the mid 90s, right?
Excellent.
So I'm growing up in North Texas. I'm a millennial, growing up in a Mexican American household. You know, structured and formal volunteering wasn't something that my parents passed down to me. Their type of volunteerism was really that family and friends helping each other. They never applied for a formal organization, anything like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So what I think happened probably was I read about volunteering in a book when I was about 12. I was a big reader, and I took it upon myself to apply to volunteer for the first time at 12, all by myself, on my own. I was very independent. And my first experience was with a public library. And in my part of the US, those libraries are run by local government. So that was my first connection to city government. And from there, I volunteered at several different museums and nonprofits as, you know, from 12 to 16. And I was so welcomed by the staff there. A lot of the time, I might have been the only Hispanic teen volunteering, but I was greeted and included in the work of the agency. And I was not met with a lot of barriers. And I love youth volunteer programs that are that way today, that don't create so many roadblocks for teens who might not have the support at home about service, to open the doors and to say, you can serve with us and here's how to do it.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it's a really important point you make about your Hispanic background, and I guess trying to get integrated into the culture, and volunteering seems to be a great way to do that. Have you seen that not only just in your career, but also the volunteers now that you're leading in the City of Plano?
Definitely. In Plano, we have a very culturally diverse population from all over the world. We have some large headquarters here that bring in talented professionals, and their families come with them. And sometimes it's their parents and grandparents that then make their homes in Plano. So many of them come from cultures that value service and volunteering, and they're interested in how to do that here in their new community. And then we have volunteers that are just looking to connect. They want to find a group of like-minded people. They want to feel a part of something. And so when they Google, of course, they're going to land on our program because of our name is just so general, which is good.
Yep.
You know, and they find that, and we have interviews with these new volunteers. And that is one of the reasons why I've stayed in this position, is that there's nothing like an interview experience one-on-one with a new volunteer. It is really amazing.
Yeah, interesting. On the podcast, we had Tammy Richter from South by Southwest, so also down in Texas as well. And she spoke about the influence that volunteers of different walks of life have had on the program itself. And I guess she spoke pretty well about stepping out of the way and letting volunteers have their input on the program. I guess you're seeing people come from all over America, probably all over the world, to your city. Have you noticed a change in the time you've been there by listening to that feedback from your volunteers, perhaps that have come from other areas of the world?
Yeah, I'm amazed at the reactions of some of our volunteers to our levels of service, to the just the opportunities to serve, our facilities and what they offer, just coming from a city perspective and how we respond to the needs of our residents. We have a high percentage of our volunteers who live in our city. The others, you know, may work in Plano or be nearby. So listening to that feedback and really tracking where the interest is, and then trying to flex that capacity to meet the interest in certain areas, it can be a challenge, but it's great to find fans of the library system or our Live
Yeah.
Green program, and being able to try to work out to include more people.
It's an interesting point you make, because not everybody wants to be a library volunteer, do they? It's a pretty
That's
niche
right.
audience that you're going to need to find there, and probably similar to the environmental volunteering or the animal welfare volunteering. Not everyone wants to be involved in those situations. How do you go about aligning your products to people? Because ultimately you have one website, right, displaying all the opportunities for the city. Are you physically interviewing everybody to try and see where they can fit in, or are people coming to you saying, this is exactly where I want to be, put me in there?
There's a great mix of both scenarios. We sometimes meet volunteers who have been told by their spouse,
Sure.
you need to do something. So
Okay. Get
they
out of the
land in our
house. Yeah.
office and they just want guidance and they just want to learn. And so part of what our interviewing does is also educating them on the world of volunteerism for those that have never tried it before, and to be realistic about what it takes and what kind of commitment. And that's another reason why I love my position, is that we also have relationships with our nonprofit partners. And so we're able to refer people who we know, because of our training and our expertise, might be a great fit with another organization that does work that we don't do, but would be such a great match for this person. Being a real community hub, representing the city with other organizations and listening to their needs and finding out where is help needed in the city. And if it's not with me, can I get some help over there? Because there's enough interest, I think, to spread it around. And I know COVID has turned everything upside down for some of these scenarios, but other times when we have someone that has their mind set on the animal shelter or on special events or something like that, we will work with them to verify that, yes, this is a great place for you, and here's the rest of the information that you need to know.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm really interested to dive a bit deeper into, the city-based volunteering program. And for reference, last week, we actually had Corina Herald on the podcast from the LA Sports Council. So in America, and this is different to the rest of the world, and this is why I'm interested in it, is often the Sports Council will be responsible for attracting the events and running the volunteer program to support them, like a Super Bowl or a NCAA tournaments. But for you, you're very much focused on the city-based programs, being the everyday running of volunteering for the library and others. I guess, and that's a benefit in your role, is that you can find a really diverse array of roles for people to get into, perhaps compared to the Sports Council, where it's very much people know what they're signing up for, and that's the only thing that they're probably going to be involved with is on the sports side. And that diversity seems like a big attraction to volunteer with you.
It really is. And we try not to box people into their departments. We do have opportunities that they can try out an area. If it's not a good fit, they might be invited to do something else. We also have volunteers that have very limited amounts of time, and so they might just subscribe to our newsletter. They want to read inspiring stories. They want to know good things are happening. They want to hear what's going on in their backyard, but they might not be able to serve. So those kind of fans and building organic lists of just people in the community that want to know information has been great for us, so that when we do make the call, we do have a new program we're launching, we have a captive audience.
Got it. Makes sense to me. Yeah, for sure. So can you talk to me about the organization structure that supports this city volunteering? Like, how many staff do you have working in the team, and how do you execute this?
So when our program was founded, it was actually 37 years ago, so older than I am now. It was founded by our city council, made a decision to create a centralized volunteer program for the city. So it was small at that time, but currently we have a population of, I think, a little over 260,000 people. Our staff at the City of Plano is about 3,000. And then the volunteer program, again, can go up to 10,000. But within the city, those 3,000 people aren't all managing volunteers. So we have about 200 staff that are either leading volunteers or have some touch points with volunteers. And so we stay in touch with them. And part of our training role with our staff is to provide education on best practices and working with volunteers and to support them, because they are all different types of paid job titles, from a police officer to a librarian to
Sure.
a public employee. So that structure where we support the departments, not every city has.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. And I understand from our chat earlier that youth volunteering is a big priority for you and a passion, probably fair enough reason for yourself that was a big reason you're doing what you are today. Can you talk to me a bit about how you go about engaging young people into your program, firstly? And then secondly, how do you go about keeping them in the program?
So working with teens is a tricky situation for
Yes, it
people.
is.
They're so enthusiastic. They love technology, but they know what they've heard before, right? They know when you're not being genuine, I feel like, and when you're not looking out for them. So when I created our teen volunteer program, when I joined the organization, I really wanted it to feel comfortable for them. Like I was a mentor. I'm somebody that they could contact for information. And I was a cool person. So I worked on that to get their buy-in. We launched an online database system where they could sign up, which I think every teen program needs an online presence to get people engaged, to get teens on board. And it took time to work with staff to create opportunities for teens, because there is stigma about youth volunteer programs, that the caliber just couldn't be as good as adult volunteers, or they won't
Sure.
be serious in their work. So I think a lot of that is highlighting the success of teens, and we try to do that often by showcasing the great work that they do.
Interesting. What do you think about that stigma? And because I see it as well, people going, oh, they're unreliable, they're not going to turn up, these sorts of things. And how do you sort of counteract that in a way? Like your library volunteers, you're going to need to treat your teenagers differently in regards to the way you're communicating with them, online presence and so on. I guess the second point there is about the retention of those volunteers, to make sure, firstly, that they have a good experience, but then secondly, where they're volunteering, want them back. To your point about the stigma about, oh, the quality wouldn't be as good as senior volunteers. So maybe my question is, how do you ensure that quality of volunteering through those teenagers that you're putting out there to volunteer?
So we set expectations with teens, and I made a teen volunteer program. So they are joining something. And when teens join something and they feel that they're part of a special group, it makes them care about it and be interested in it. And I still
Sure.
use email. I know, so I tell them, hey guys, I still use email. You guys need to check your email. And they get it. They understand that that's the structure of the program, but I set the expectation ahead of time. I let them know the maturity level that they are representing the city of Plano, which many of them love their city. And so they're willing to take the next step. But again, they're teens. So they're 14 and 15. And think of the things we did at 14 and 15
Yeah, of
and the
course.
that we made. So it's educating the staff to be prepared for summer camp season, to say, okay, there's going to be some hiccups. We're going to address it. But for them to be confident that I've prepared the best I can, the teens with the right information, and I set those expectations. And then with the students, they're not going to be fired the first time they make a mistake. That's not what we do. We use it as an educational moment to go over the dress code, or that your sibling can't come with you. And sometimes it's not their fault. Their parents might have made assumptions, and just, things happen. But a lot of that is communication, is setting up expectations with teens, but making them have a connection to joining something. So it really needs to be an organized group so that they feel that connection to it.
Yeah, very interesting. And you made an interesting point there about, it's not just the volunteers you need to be briefing and providing structure to, but also those that you're placing the volunteers with. Now, you may not need to go to that level for, again, the library volunteers or other areas. But for these teenage ones, perhaps it's about briefing those that will be looking after them on the day and getting their buy-in to say, get ready and be prepared for almost anything that may happen. And we need to roll with the punches a bit. That seems like an important step that perhaps sometimes might be missed out in volunteer management.
Yeah, thinking back to 13 years ago when I started the teen volunteer program, everyone having a cell phone wasn't as prevalent as it is the last 5 years. So there was so many new rules and reminders and things we had to talk about with the teens. And just, there's so much social skill development going on with teens that they're nervous and they need to learn to be comfortable talking with paid staff and seeing them as someone they can ask questions to. And it's not their principal, it's not coach, it's someone in between kind of, and that they're going to take direction from, but they can't be afraid. So that's a learned skill, these social kind of soft skills. But the more practice they get, the better they're going to be. And we've had so many teens go off to college and continue to serve.
Yeah, really interesting. And it's a big passion of mine is about engaging young people in volunteering, and clearly yours too. So I'm interested and have a few more questions about it. Is there like a long-term goal that you're trying to connect them with, or even rewards? So for example, if you do 20 shifts this year, you will get a badge of recognition, or you'll have your name up on an honors board. Is there sort of incentives that you're providing to get people to stick around, or is it more just the feel and the connectedness that you're selling to them ultimately, right? We need to sell to people to get them to sign up in the first place and then to stick around. What are you sort of selling to get them to stick around?
I think there is a sense of exclusivity as far as getting a spot in our teen program, because we've taken over the years to grow it. Mm-hmm. So when they find out there is 500 kids on the waiting list or 800 or something like that, that really makes them stop and take it more seriously. Sure. So they're not signing up because I'm telling them I'm going to give them a shirt, but that part of the club kind of thing of being eligible to apply, and it's just an open list. Everyone is eligible the same as the next student. But I do still send out the certificates. This year we did digital certificates, but they loved it. They save the file, and in the past they've been invited to recognition events. And I toyed with the decision between, do I have a separate teen recognition? Would they be more comfortable in a room of just, their age group? But what I ended up continuing was to invite them to our adult recognition and have it be for everyone, because I wanted to have all of our volunteers see them get recognized in front of the entire group. Sometimes we have council members that come from our city, and for everyone in the room to see them and seeing them eating or hanging out with volunteers of all ages and backgrounds and ability levels is just such a great moment to bring everyone together, when typically we are volunteering before COVID separately. But so I think that there's decisions every organization has to make, whether you separate your teens from your core group out of a number of maybe fears or concerns. But as I experienced as a teen volunteer, working alongside adults in these organizations taught me a lot and helped me become comfortable in different kinds of organizations.
Yeah, very interesting. And I know I've referenced a few of the other podcasts, but my last one here is a Chris Randall podcast we had. He worked at the London Games, Olympic Games, and he mentioned that the volunteers and the paid staff all wore the same uniform. And it's an interesting concept that we're all working towards the same thing. Sure, some of us paid, some of us are volunteer, but we're all one team, one dream kind of element. And I think that goes to your point about bringing the group together to celebrate at the end of the year as well, which I think is a really valuable thing to do. My last question on engaging with young volunteers is about ultimately selling to them about coming to volunteer. I would presume you are selling it less about the job they are doing in volunteering, but more about the connecting to community and the larger connectedness compared to your job is this, and that's why they're doing it. Does that question firstly make sense? And do you hear where I'm coming from there?
Yeah. So not every teen is available to volunteer every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m.
Correct.
It's just their availability is different. Our community, they are very scheduled. They have a lot of commitments pre-COVID, where they are going to driver's ed, SAT prep, which is, the big test, and academic and sporting commitments. So we really have to, when they join, not place a lot of emphasis on you need to do this number of hours. I'm going to put you into this role. It's very much they get to pick and choose where and when they volunteer. So I don't have an hours requirement for the teens. They just have to respond to my emails to stay on the list. And I know that they're out there. And then when they have more time to give, they will. But I love writing the recommendation letters, the scouting projects when they come to interview me. And I've had some over Zoom now. They interview me for projects and papers and things, and they are so excited and curious about the work of volunteer management and to find out, what do I really do? Besides send them emails, what else is going on? And that community engagement piece, they're joining their city and everything that we represented, that we try to do for their neighborhoods. And that's what keeps them around, because I definitely don't send them gifts.
Yeah, correct. I understand. Okay, so a couple of questions to round it out. Really, your number one top tip for engaging with volunteers?
Good question.
Tough one, I know, when there's a lot.
So my top tip, engaging volunteers, I really go back to honesty and using your honesty in your communication. I think our volunteers like to really know what's going on. I encourage behind the scenes sharing of information, personal stories, following up with phone calls and emails, and being honest about the situation at hand. And right now we're in a pandemic, but it could be something else happening at the organization. And just, sometimes I hear from volunteer managers that they're afraid to share something happy and positive during this time. And I encourage them to do it, because I know our volunteers, even those that are not able to be active, if they're staying at home and they're staying safe, they still want to know uplifting news from organizations that they care about. So we have a quarterly newsletter. I'm pulling, organic content from the community, from our volunteers, from everywhere and anywhere that has a tie to our volunteer program. And no one since March has told me to stop telling them good news.
Sure. Okay. I think that's a really interesting insight, is about to share that positivity, even when it may not feel necessarily that right in this time, but good feedback. So next one is about, is there a single moment that jumps out to you from your career in volunteering, either from your work you're doing now or even maybe when you were younger, that really stands out to you about sort of the impact that volunteering has?
So when I went to university, I majored in applied gerontology, which is the study of aging and working with senior citizens and older adults.
Sure.
I also minored in volunteer management, nonprofit management. So I went the academic route there. So when I think of my, my most positive moments with volunteers, I just think of the stories that I hear, when the teens come in to meet with me and they are so extra dressed up and they are nervous and they shake my hand and call me Mrs. Sadler, and they are excited about what's about to happen with their teen interview. Those moments are really just so uplifting. And then on the other side of the life journey, when we have volunteers that have given 20 years, 30 years to volunteering with our organization, and then they retire, but then later on I might hear that there is a memorial for them when they've passed, and I either attend or I read about it, and they mention the volunteer program. They mention their parents' connection to the city, the photo that's used from a volunteer event. I mean, these are such deep stories and connections that relate back to how impactful volunteerism is for certain people that really need that in their life.
Yeah, brilliant. Great insight. That's very special. So last question for you, Corina, is about success. So for you personally, when you're sitting at Christmas lunch, looking back on the year, maybe not this year with COVID, but in any normal year, what does success look like for you and I guess the work that you're doing in the community?
That is a great question. And I do reflect a lot, especially as you mentioned, the end of the year when I think back at everything that's happened and who I've met. I feel like success is when I still get cold emails from people, when I still get phone calls asking for my expertise, when I still have people that respond back and tell me that they're there for me. That means that they've connected with my work and that we have this trust and that will roll over to the next year. And it makes me really happy.
Yeah, fantastic. Nice way to round out the podcast, Corina. I think what I found interesting today is, I guess, the influence of volunteering has had on you personally, integrating into the community, and now the work that you're doing to help the community from that experience, I think is a really special one, and clearly working with a lot of passion behind you, in particular for the youths volunteering in your program. So hopefully today people will take a bit out of it in terms of that engagement with youth in their program, which is very important. So we really appreciate your time today, and I hope you enjoyed it, Corina.
I really did. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Engage Volunteer podcast with Corina Sadler. We hope you enjoyed it. If this is your first time listening, then welcome. Our podcast aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging with their communities to connect them to events and causes they're passionate about, with new episodes released each Wednesday fortnight. The best ways to support the podcast is to click follow where you listen to your podcast and tell your friends about us. We look forward to joining you for the next one. Cheers.